Here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16, there's something about the rapture that always had me never knowing what Paul was saying. And I was stumped. I've been stumped for years until the other day when I had an epiphany. It just came to me. What Paul is saying here. When he says that the dead in Christ shall rise first, and then we which are alive and remain will be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. I have always looked at this verse and the next verse, verse 17, these verses, as all happening at the same time. So the day of the rapture, that's when the dead in Christ rise. And then we're caught up. But that never made sense to me because what Paul says in 2 Corinthians. He says, absent from the body, present with the Lord. So in 2 Corinthians, Paul says, as soon as you die, you leave your body, you're present with the Lord. But then you have here in 1 Thessalonians 4:16 that it says, the dead in Christ rise first, and then we're caught up. But what Paul is saying is he's explaining that anybody who has died prior to us being caught up, well, they've risen first. The dead, whoever dies, rises first over a span of thousands of years. So they're already with the Lord, and they've risen first. It doesn't all happen in one day. That's not what he's saying. He's explaining to you the process. He says, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. So anybody who has died in Christ before we're caught up has risen first. The dead rise first who are in Christ. And then we which are alive remain or be caught up in the air. See, I used to look at this all as in happening at the same exact time. That's not what Paul's saying. And it dawned on me the other day. And now it makes so much sense. Because I'll be honest with you, this had me stumped. Because I used to think, well, how can the dead in Christ rise right before we're caught up if Paul writes in 2 Corinthians that when you die, you're with the Lord already? Well, how are they going to rise if they're already with the Lord? Where are they coming from? What do you mean? But that's not what Paul's saying. He's explaining to you the process. Yeah, the dead in Christ rise first. Meaning that whoever has died before we're caught up has already risen. Because the dead in Christ rise first. You cannot go to heaven while you're alive until you're caught up. You can only go to heaven if you're dead. Hence, the dead in Christ rise first. Before the living. And then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up. That's what Paul's saying. And that's the only way that this makes sense. I've heard people try to explain this away, and none of it has ever made sense to me. Oh, well, it means this, it means that. No, wait. If they're already with the Lord, how are they going to rise right before we're caught up? Because they're already risen, aren't they, with the Lord? Well, yeah, that's what Paul's saying. Anybody who dies before we're caught up has risen already. That means they rise first, before the living. The dead in Christ rise first, before the living. Anybody who has died in Christ has risen. That means they rise first, before the living. Because you can't go to heaven alive unless you're caught up. Hence, that's why Paul says, the dead in Christ rise first. For thousands of years, they've risen first before the living at the very end. Because I had no idea what Paul was saying here. I had no idea. I said, Paul, you said that when you're absent from the body, you're present with the Lord. Meaning that the dead are already in heaven. Well, that's what he's saying here. That's actually exactly what he's saying here. The dead in Christ shall rise first. For thousands of years. Every time a person who's in Christ dies, they've risen first, before the living at the end. See what I'm saying? That's amazing. That clears up a big old gap in my mind that I could not answer. Paul is explaining, giving you an overview of how it works. Anybody who dies rises first, before, which is before the final harpazo.